Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. We are here with a very, very special guest. I am here with Palantir's Executive Vice President of the UK and Europe, Louis Mosley. Louis, thank you for being here.
Great to be here, Amit.
I am very excited to talk to you. I've known about you for the past couple of years. I researched you in particular when Palantir was competing for the NHS contract, and I know we'll get into that. But you have had a long history with Palantir. You've worked at the company for a while, and you've seen the company from when no one really cared about it to March 2025, when it seems like everyone cares about Palantir. So I just want to go back a little bit in time. When did you join Palantir, and why are you still at the company here today?
Thanks, Amit. So I joined Palantir back in 2017, which, as you say, was not an obvious time to join Palantir. Lots of reasons we go into why that was the case, but yeah, we'd broken out of a kind of mysterious company that worked with Intel that no one had really heard of. We'd raised big valuations. We were trying to build a corporate business, but there were lots of reasons why things were, frankly, our revenue was pretty flat those years.
Yeah.
So we were growing into the valuation. It was a time when Palantir was starting to get controversial. Our offices in the Valley were being picketed. It was the midst of the kind of the controversy around ICE and our involvement with those parts of the Trump 1 administration. But I joined because, I knew lots of guys at Palantir. I had friends there. I'd followed the company for a long time, and I really believed in the mission. Karp especially, he was one of the few people who at that time was saying the things he still says today.
Yep.
And I think a lot of the world has come around to his way of thinking. But it was, it was like a clarion call. It was like, that's the guy you want to go and work for.
Right. It's so interesting because I've had the honor and privilege to speak to many of the employees at the company, and the ones that have joined from the 2010 to 2015 era, it's really interesting to see why they joined, why they still stay. Palantir is one of the lowest churn rates in the entire tech industry, and how inspired they are by the mission. And now it's just really interesting because the rest of the world has kind of caught up to what Palantir is doing, and it's kind of exciting to see that play out. You are in charge of the business in the UK and Europe. What is that like across the pond from the commercial business? Obviously, the United States commercial business is growing like crazy. Europe not growing that much. So can you speak a little bit to, I guess, some of the challenges and benefits of being in Europe?
Yeah, so I'm based in London. It's maybe a little known fact, but 25% of Palantir's global workforce is actually in the UK, in London. Yep. For a long time, we were the largest single office that Palantir had anywhere in the world. And it's only really quite recently, in the last couple of years, that our US corporate business, as you mentioned, has started to really take off, that we've seen the offices in New York in particular start to grow and overtake London. So London has been a very, very important center for Palantir for quite a while. There's a few reasons for that. One, I think, is talent. London is one of 2 or 3 places in the world, like the Bay Area, like New York, where you have a lot of super talented engineers.
Yeah.
And so Palantir followed them and built an office around them. So we do a lot of product development in London. It's not just a BD office. Second reason is the UK itself was the first big market outside of the US that Palantir started to build a real business. So we've been active in the UK, both on the corporate side and with the government for over a decade now. And that, is the only geography, for example, that is large enough for us to report in our earnings separately.
Yeah.
It's a significant percentage of our revenue still. And the third reason, again, which is maybe little known, but if you roll back, as you said, 7 or 8 years, our corporate business was actually growing faster in Europe than it was in the US. And we built a fairly sizable business with some of those big logos in Europe, like Airbus, like BP, like BMW, etc. And it's only much more recently that the business in the US has started to take off. You mentioned a big difference in the growth rate. I would treat that as essentially a proxy for the rate of AI adoption in those economies. So what you're seeing in the US, our growth rate in corporates is 50% plus. That is because US corporates are investing deeply in AI.
Right.
Go to continental Europe, single-digit percentage growth. They're not adopting AI. And I, as a European, I really worry about that.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. I mean, Karp has talked about this publicly many times. In fact, he's even talked about it on earnings calls where he feels Germany, France, I mean, a lot of these European countries are late to the revolution. In your opinion, is there a real revolution happening right now? And what is the actual downstream effect of being late to that revolution?
Oh, totally. Undoubtedly, there's a revolution happening. And it's a revolution where first movers are going to have a real advantage, because the revolution doesn't have the same reversion to mean kind of dynamic that a lot of previous tech revolutions have had. So if you think of, your ERP system revolution to improve the efficiency of your supply chain, this is going back 20, 30 years. You install that, you're more competitive than, the company, your peer, but they can install the same system and catch up. So you might get a lead for a few years, but there's a reversion to mean.
Right.
With the AI revolution, there are exponentials, there are feedback loops. And I think that means that early adopters that get on the train first are going to just pick up speed. And then there will come a point, it's a tipping point, where you can get on the train, you can get on the same track, but you're never going to catch the first mover. And that's where I worry about a two-speed economy in the West, where you've got the US racing ahead, adopting AI, and you've got Europe in a different lane going much slower. The big European companies that I mentioned, 20 years ago, they were super competitive with their US peers. In 20 years' time, they still need to be if Europe is to have the kind of wealth and society that it has today.
What do you think will be the wake-up call? Will it be just like lack of earnings growth on some of these companies and shareholders are going to demand it? Or is it going to be something worse than that creates the wake-up call for them?
I hope it's the former, because if it's the former, that wake-up call, you can address it, you can do something about it. If you leave it too late, it's too late. One of the problems, of course, is that the European Union has passed the EU AI Safety Act, which is a bit of legislation that actually makes it very hard to experiment with AI, to adopt AI, to try AI. And I think that's had a chilling effect, actually, on a lot of European companies, and certainly for a lot of startups and tech companies that are busy figuring out what AI means in practice. You look at, well, shall I try it in the EU or shall I try it in the US? You go, well, I'll try it in the US. I'm not going to run the risk of being litigated in Europe for accidentally doing the wrong thing.
Right. Palantir has kind of proven themselves to the market, I would say, over the past year and a half, not only by the growth rates, but also the sort of the qualitative stories and metrics. We've had 6 AIP cons now, where customers have said, it's Palantir. Like, it is like, we're using them for a reason. We like using them on a handful of companies that we reach out to when we think of an AI operating system. Palantir is on that list. I think the executives at the company, the employees, are starting to feel a little bit more confident about the work they've been doing over the past 20 years, now that the market's recognizing that. Do you feel that confidence every day in your day-to-day life? And how are you seeing that confidence potentially be instilled in some of the clients and the new deals that you guys are trying to get as well?
Yeah, 100%. And it is, we have been doing the same thing for 20 years. And I think a lot of people underestimate that. They don't realize how consistent the focus and effort has been at Palantir and for how long it's been going on. And I think it's also symptomatic of, actually, you do need that kind of maniacal focus and that kind of consistent effort in the layers of the tech stack where we have operated for that long to build the technology that's now meeting its moment with AI. It's, we talk a lot about the ontology. That was probably not a word that anyone had ever heard until we started using it. I'm still not sure it's the word we should use. It seems to leave a lot of people a little bit confused and lost, but you cannot make AI useful in your enterprise without something that looks like an ontology.
Right.
And we have been figuring out what is the tech you need to build, maintain, and operate ontologies in flight in the most complex, the most secure, the most sensitive data environments you can imagine for 2 decades.
Yeah. It's really exciting. I actually got into Palantir because of the word ontology. I come from a debate background, and philosophy was like very important to learn debate. And ontology, from going back hundreds of years, is a philosophical term to define the state of being. And so in 2021, when I saw you guys were describing the state of your enterprise as an ontological operating system, it was so attractive to me as an idea philosophically. And now the rest of the world is starting to realize why an ontology matters from a tech perspective, which is just so cool to see. NHS, I want to spend a little time and talk about them, particularly the NHS deal, which is a contract for Palantir to have a national federated data platform and essentially build the ontology among a host of different tools to manage a system that, quite frankly, has not worked as well in the UK. What was it like back in 2022, 2023? I think the deal closed at the end of 2023 to actually get that deal. And how did you deal with the societal pushback against Palantir in the United Kingdom?
Yeah, lots of questions there. So the NHS, for those who don't know much about it, is the national healthcare system in the UK. It's what we call a single payer system. So it's paid for entirely out of taxation. There's no insurance model. There's no private element to it. It's just general taxation pays for it. And the principle, and it goes back to 1948, it's an old institution that was founded after the Second World War, really as a quid pro quo for people being conscripted into that war, doing their duty for the country. They come home, they deserve a healthcare service, they deserve proper housing, etc.
Right.
And it's free at the point of delivery. So it's agnostic to your need, to your circumstances, to who you are. It treats everyone the same, etc. So that's the model. Now, what that means is it's one national system, like you said. In practice, of course, it's a panoply of hundreds of different organizations that operate locally and somewhat in their own silo.
Right.
But if you want to really start to make the system work and work efficiently and treat patients fairly, then you need to start to join all of those pieces up. Hence the value, as you said, of a national ontology, of that data integration across the whole country and creating a kind of homogeneous layer of a virtual representation of the physical reality, that ontology. So they call it the canonical data model.
Right.
And it's actually something they have open sourced. So it's now on GitHub, which I think is kind of magical. So you can go and start to build against it. But of course, the vision there is, it is, as you said, we are the operating system. We are like iOS. But to really transform healthcare, you're then going to need an ecosystem, a whole library of applications that are going to serve all of those individual workflows that need to have AI introduced into them or whatever it might be. Right. Some of those we might build, but it's an open ecosystem. And we need startups, third parties, big players to come and help.
So this sounds like magical. This sounds like it's one of the most transparent things ever. It's something that also the NHS obviously needs because in practicality, the implementation of a single payer system is not always the most effective. And we've seen this not just in the UK, but in many different, I would say, socialized systems across the world. I started covering Palantir deeply in 2021. And then in 2022, I started seeing the pushback in the UK in particular for Palantir getting this contract. You guys ended up winning. Why do you think there was so much pushback?
There was a lot of pushback because the NHS is the closest thing Britain has to a national religion. It's a beloved institution. We're born in NHS hospitals. We typically die in NHS hospitals. The most important moments in our lives, the birth of our children, the death of loved ones, happen in these hospitals. So the emotional attachment to the NHS is very, very deep. It's also the keeper of some of the most, if not the most sensitive information about every British citizen. It's our medical records.
Right.
And so there's a visceral and attachment from every individual in the country to this institution. And Palantir was an unknown company that had this background in defense and intelligence, that was American, that kind of came with a bit of a big tech label maybe, and, lots of suspicion about was our business model like other tech companies that provide a product for free but then monetize your data. So was this somehow a way for a big bad American company to get hold of precious British medical records and then sell them? So lots of anxieties like that were under the surface and then would, as you say, kind of break out. And so we had to really prove that we were not all of those things, that we could be trusted, and not just trusted, but trusted with the most sensitive information and to help run the most beloved institution in the country. It was an incredibly high bar. And, as Carp has the riffs, right, about, people don't buy us because of the steak dinners and the charming nature of Palantirians and so forth. They buy us because we're the best. And
you guys work.
We work, exactly. And you know what? I love that scrutiny. I love that pushback, because what it means is we got to be not just better and work. We've got to be 10 times better. We've got to work 100 times better than the competitor.
1000%. And I think this is why people are so excited to invest in Palantir and follow the company, follow the mission. It's like, it's hard to find things that work. And when we're talking about the national healthcare system of an entire country, it's like, well, if that works, that's probably something to get excited about, because if it can work there, where else can it work? And to kind of prove some of these early results and how much it works, I'm sharing a thread that you posted on X. Louis' X will be in the description, so everyone watching, please make sure to follow him there. But these are some pretty interesting results in terms of backlogs and wait times that have been reduced. Do you think that the general pushback that existed in 2022 based off American company, just people not knowing enough about Palantir, is going to be outweighed by the results? Because at the end of the day, if your mom needs a surgery and she has to have a less wait time, that probably matters more than your ideological sentiment around Palantir.
Totally. That's exactly it. And, most people are not ideological. Most people just want government services to work. They want to turn up in a hospital and not have to wait, not have to explain 17 times who they are to 17 different people, what it is that the issue, that's the expectation. And we can enable the NHS to meet that expectation. And that will, in the end, settle all arguments.
Yeah. You shared some additional information a couple of weeks ago around policing in the UK. Anything you can tell us about how police in the United Kingdom might start to be utilizing Palantir more?
Yeah, well, we are working with a couple of police forces. This is much newer work than the NHS. It's only really in the last year, and we've seen some really dramatic results. Just to give you like one example, the time it takes to investigate a suspect, and you can imagine, right? You've got a suspect, you've got to look up as many details as you can about this individual. In practice, that means probably logging into a bunch of different systems. It's quite a long-winded process. We have, and this is an independent number, we have cut the time it takes the investigators to run that process by 95%.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is the type of stuff that people get excited about, and investors in particular are like, all right, they're doing some of this stuff.
And when you think of the mission, it's like, how many more cases can a single investigator work through? And the experience we all have of, in the US or the UK, it's like backlogs, right? It's like you have to wait for everything. Everything takes time. Government is slow.
Yeah. And I think what's also really important is that the NHS to me was seen as like this opportunity to expand in the UK. And if policing starts to see benefits in terms of a 95% reduction in times to aggregate data and to make sense of that data, a lot of our most important institutions that are right now under a legitimacy crisis, as Alex Karp would call it, they start to become a bit more legitimate based on the idea of software. Yeah. And if that can expand throughout all of Europe, I mean, I think that's where there's a lot of potential for the company as well.
100%. It's, we are in a crisis of competence. The experience of citizens around the world is that there are a lot of government services and got a lot of government institutions that don't deliver what people expect.
Do you think technology is what needs to be the middleman in a socially democratic society? As in, if you do something through the free markets, it tends to be a bit more efficient because you don't have bureaucracy, et cetera. But if you do something for a more socialized system, it tends to be more empathetic because everyone has access to it. The way to sort of close the gap between private markets being more efficient and socially democratic systems being more empathetic, to me, is technology. It doesn't take away from the social values, but it brings the benefits of the private market. Is that kind of how you see Palantir software in things like the NHS?
Yeah, I think look, I think with if you take the NHS as an example, the software we're providing is an incredibly complex bit of kit that's taken decades to build, billions of dollars of R&D. And the benefit of that to the NHS is they can use the full scope of that capability for a fraction of the cost that we've had to invest to build it, because we can amortize that upfront investment across thousands of clients. The alternative is they try and build something like that themselves, extremely expensive, probably won't work, and so on and so forth. But that's the magic. And I think it's a little bit like an MRI scanner. The NHS shouldn't be in the business of, my opinion, manufacturing MRI scanners. It should be in the business of delivering care to patients.
Right. Yeah, no, that is very, very fair. And I think at the end of the day, the more the NHS or any institution is in the business of getting the job done, getting results, that ends up leading to better outcomes. There was also something that was shared a couple of months ago, early January, about a product called Nordic Warden. Can you speak a little bit about that and what
Yep.
the UK's role is in that?
Well, that's a great and fairly unique example, actually, of because it's public, of the kind of work that we do in defence in the UK and in Europe more broadly. So, as I think everyone will probably know, there is lots of suspicious activity that happens in the Baltic Sea. So this is, where Russia meets Finland and Sweden and the Baltic countries, and there's lots and lots of cabling that runs through that sea, undersea cables of different kinds, and lots of suspected sabotage that is happening. And the UK Ministry of Defence put out this press release that, you're showing it here, which talks about a capability that they have built using our software to monitor that activity in collaboration with all of those countries in the region, to check that the nefarious alleged sabotage is or isn't happening.
Right. And again, it's really cool because it points to the diversity of the ability of the software, as you mentioned before, the ontology and how vast it can span, and whether it's policing, monitoring the Baltic states, the NHS. I mean, like, is that another really cool part of working at Palantir, which is just that you really think the world is your TAM because anyone could use your software?
Absolutely. And I think it's also part of the, for people who join Palantir, the opportunity to work on that variety of problems. And the way it's organized culturally internally is people typically move, right? They might work 6-12 months on one project and then move to a different one. So
Right.
Over your career at Palantir, you get exposure to all of those different worlds. And how cool is that?
Yeah. Okay, let's do some rapid fire questions to kind of end this out. A lot of people know you, but for the investors and for the retail community base, the people that don't really know who you are, what has been the most exciting part about working at Palantir for the past 10 years? And I guess, why does it keep you there, even though you've achieved so many levels of success at the company already?
Well, I think we're only just getting started, like, genuinely. I mean, we're right at the beginning of the journey. We've barely scratched the surface. But the thing that keeps me here is the people. We attract, in my opinion, the brightest, the most committed, the most eccentric, often interesting, unusual people. And like you say, they often stay for a long time and they grow. And it's growth at Palantir is not like other companies. We have a very flat structure. We don't have job titles. So you don't get that ladder of, you go from, assistant to vice president to president to, I don't know, the kind of conventional route. It's a sort of horizontal thing. Your responsibilities change, but you grow. And then you combine that with the variety of problems and the scale of problem that we're starting to get access to now for all the reasons you mentioned. The impact that you can start to have is just gigantic. So you combine people and impact, and why would you ever work anywhere else?
It's a hell of a question. And I've spoken to a lot of Palantir engineers as well. And they told me, like, dude, Google's great, but Palantir is Palantir. Google's working on advertising, Palantir's working on defending democracy. It's like, there's so many different nuances towards the mission for why you want to work here. Okay, here's another question. What has life been like from 2017 to 2025 in terms of the progression of the narrative shifting around Palantir? Because I think very few times you are lucky enough to be in a situation where either you've built something or you're part of something in the early days where no one believes, and then it looks like almost everyone believes. I mean, just psychologically, mentally, how have you dealt with that as a business leader?
So I think one of the really, for me, remarkable things about CARP and therefore Palantir as a whole is, and maybe this gets back to your philosophical point, it's an organization deeply attached to the truth, to truth seeking.
Yeah.
And as CARP sometimes says, it's hard but relatively easy to know when things are wrong. It's very hard to know when things are true. But I think over that period, we have been incredibly consistent in that truth seeking mission. And so in a funny way, it hasn't changed much. And we felt the world moving around us, and we were misunderstood, or we thought they were crazy. They thought we were crazy. Now we feel somewhat better understood. They don't think we're crazy, but it hasn't fundamentally changed for me. It is the same. You feel like you're deep under the sea, right? And there's the storm going on the surface, there's crazy waves and winds, but you're just this consistent current, flowing underneath.
Yeah, and the authenticity of that consistency is like real. It's not a gimmick of like,
Totally.
oh, we've been. It's like, no. They've like, you guys have been preaching the same message when it was very unpopular to preach that message. It's just kind of the world has adopted to that message in and of itself. There's a lot of retail interest around the company. What has that been like to you to see people like me, people like Arnie? I mean, all these random people across the world that are like, we really support Palantir and we want to talk about them every single day.
It's been great, and I think particularly, when did you said 2021, you first started kind of paying attention, and there wasn't a lot of people paying attention in 2021, and certainly not people who were going deep like you guys were, like actually researching, actually digging in. There was analysts and other professionals that, but to be honest, their interest was very surface level. And so then discovering that there were people out there that, and you started to build communities that would really dig into anything we put out, question it, engage. That was fascinating to us. I mean, that we'd been largely in the shadows, maybe ignored. There's a little bit of mainstream media interest, but mainstream media, there's a lot of intermediation that goes on there. You don't have a kind of direct conversation like this. You don't get a long time to talk, and all of that. So it was very, very important, I think, and I think for a lot of people quite validating as well.
Yeah, it's been a hell of a journey for me. I mean, just seeing, like, literally, I mean, we do live streams and there's 10,000 people that care about your earnings. And it's like, earnings streams are not like, it's just the company's public numbers, right? They're not supposed to be that exciting. Right. But I don't think it's about the numbers. I think people just care about you guys progressing more and more to be the behemoth we think you can become. And it's just been amazing to see you guys execute over the past couple of years.
Well, I think, and the other thing is that those in your community that invested when they did, they've done very well. And that is a source of enormous pride, actually, and sort of pleasure I think for me, certainly, and I think for a lot of people at Palantir, that, we have been able to contribute like that.
Louis, what is your work day like? Are you in meetings all day? Are you traveling a lot? Like, what is a typical day in the life for?
Yeah, there's a fair amount of travel. Yeah, I'm on the road quite a lot. I don't have a desk. I don't like sitting still. So depending how you want to describe it, I'm floating around the office. I know you probably have to ask some of my colleagues.
It's like Carp. I heard Carp walks around all the time. You're walking around. So.
Oh yeah, I mean Carp's on a different level. Yeah, but I'm in London. Yeah, I'm in London at least 1-2 days a week, and then typically on the road otherwise.
Wow, that's a lot of travel. That means 60% of the week you're traveling.
Yeah, probably on average, something like that. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, you are traveling across the world, getting these deals done. I love it. Last couple questions. Your favorite movie?
8.5.
Okay.
Fellini movie, Italian. Highly recommend.
Favorite book, if you have one?
The Idiot by Dostoevsky.
Now I know why you joined Palantir. You got a lot of philosophy in you. Okay, there we go. Okay, final question for the UK folks. What is your favorite food in London?
Curry.
I think
you get the best curries in the world now in London.
Yeah. In particular, I've heard Indian food in London is on a different level, and so
it's worth coming here just for that. Genuinely.
Yeah, I think I'll be there in the summer. Actually, I'm going to do a trip through London, so.
Well, we're gonna have to go out and have some curry then.
We're gonna have to get some curry. I love it. Louis Mosley, Executive VP of Palantir for the UK and Europe. Really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining. I'm sure the audience is going to love hearing from you in your first kind of long form interview on my channel, which is super awesome. Final question for you. What is your message to everyone out there who continues to care and study about Palantir every single day?
We are just getting started. The most exciting bits are still to come.
And this is really cool because Carp says the same message, and every employee I talk to is like, dude, we're just getting started. And it's like,
yeah, totally. Like when you're on the inside, you can see it. And, there's always stuff we can't talk about, but like I've genuinely never been more excited.
I love it. Louis Mosley, thank you for joining. And thank you, everybody else. We will see you guys on the next one.